I would like to welcome everyone to this much awaited panel discussion focused on bioinformatics in industry. So today we are privileged to have some of the leaders from bioinformatics and biomedical industry involved in pharmaceutical industry, assisting in modern drug discovery. So our first panelist, Dr. Samir Khader, is a senior director of advanced analytical data science and bioinformatics at Astrazeneca, a global science-led biopharmaceutical company. So at AstraZeneca, he leads a global team of data scientists, biomedical scientists, statisticians, and software engineers. He oversees profiles and portfolios and projects in oncology and biopharma to accelerate drug discovery and development using biomedical and clinical data and machine learning approaches. So we just heard from Dr. Shamir sharing insights from pharmaceutical perspective in applying bioinformatics, especially putting emphasis on data and the technology, applying data science and envisioning artificial intelligence in the pharmaceutical industry. Along with Dr. Shamir, we have Mr. Darun Walia, currently at MIT, selected as prestigious Sloan Fellow. Mr. Tarun is a biotechnologist by training and with a broad experience in areas such as biotechnology consultation over 14 years, and then worked across 3 different continents. He is an expert in business strategy, R&D planning, and pipeline strategies. His work also involved in marketing and branding strategies in pharma and biotechnology. Our next panelist is Mr. Anthony Finbow. So Anthony Finbo is the CEO of Eagle Genomics and has achieved success over many years as a CEO of technology businesses. He has occupied every seat at the board table: chairman, CEO, CFO, NXD, and investor director for both public and private companies, and now assists leaders and their management teams in meeting and overcoming the most significant challenges that they might encounter on their journey. In the panel, Mr. Finbo will share his perspective on different aspects of the gap that he sees in academia and industry in bioinformatics, and the vision he has built to build an ecosystem with students, faculty, partners around the world to advance the bioinformatics or biotechnology platforms that enables Eagle Genomics as a company. Next, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Mr. Naheed Kurgi. Naheed Kurgi is the president and CEO of Cyclica, a Toronto-based biotechnology company that leverages artificial intelligence, computational biophysics to reshape the drug discovery process. So Cyclica provides the pharmaceutical industry with an integrated, holistic, and end-to-end platform that enhances how scientists design, screen, and personalize medicines for patients, and has recently been named by Deep Knowledge Analytics as top 20 AI in pharma companies globally. Naheed is also co-founder of the Alliance of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, AAIH, of which Naheed is one of the 4 appointed executive officers. So he has been featured in Global Mail, Forbes, Vanity, Wuxi Insider, and has been invited faculty in many universities discussing topics such as AI in medicine. So I welcome you all here. And before we go into the actual discussion and begin the session, I would like to give everyone maybe a brief overview of how things have shaped up and why we think this session is so important. So from genetics and toxicology to microbiology to radiology, there are, different branches of biology to specialize in. And out of many, bioinformatics is one of the intriguing fields which enables us to identify, evaluate, store, and retrieve biological information, right? Something that we have learned throughout this Omics symposium. Now, integrating the elements of data science. So when it comes to medical research and or product development, data science refers to a broad, rapidly evolving field that supports the analytical process of extracting knowledge from a variety of data sources and types, right? And then integrating data types and resources such as omics data types like genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, phenomics, images and wearables the data that we get from there. All of this actually this gives us an holistic understanding and identifies in identifying the most meaningful interferences that leads to the best decisions. So big data in biotechnology is in today's world is not just only about genomics, but it's also about the data that may be collected by sensors, wearables, ingestibles, or implantable sensors that can provide this continuous data stream for clinical health, clinical trials. So in biopharma industry, the focus has now shifted towards processing data more effectively and deriving relevant insights to realize its full potential. So by working together, different analytical methods offer this holistic pictures and translate this into practical steps for product development, maybe marketing or maintenance strategies. So with this overview, I would let the panelists to take this forward and share some insights on how the future bioinformatics and data science that they envision and that they see with experience, and the best approaches that you may have figured out from your own experiences. So I would like to invite first Dr. Shamir to share his thoughts on this.
Thank you, Mohit. Really appreciate that great background and great overview. And thank you, fellow co-panelists. And in my opinion, we're seeing a sort of a transition in our industry, especially in bioinformatics industry. And I'm also a little bit concerned about that too, because everybody now calling it, data science, and then, either biological data science or biomedical data science. And we have seen that also, we have seen that even in the evolution of bioinformatics, we have seen that too, it has gone through certain cycles. But now, we are in a stage where, a bioinformatics person should have definitely the domain knowledge, domain expertise. He should know his tools, databases and all. But on top of that, having that edge in AI, machine learning and predictive modeling are going to give them, better access to jobs, positions, and internships, in my opinion. So that's where I'm thinking. And then the other potential observation that I have is that the data science on a broad is there was a Harvard Business Review piece saying that it's one of the hardest career of the century. But then again, so calling it a biomedical data science is actually good. But remember, you have a particular edge because you are trained in this domain from the get-go. So that would be my thought. I would invite Anthony to kind of comment on his observation in this theme.
Thanks, Shamir. Thanks, Mohit. And also echoing Shamir's comments, delighted to be participating alongside such a deeply competent panel here, amongst whom I'd say I'm the interloper, because I didn't and don't have a background in bioinformatics. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm an interloper, but I can claim some substance and knowledge because 30 plus years ago, I did my studies in cybernetics, control engineering and maths. And that's deeply information theory related. And I have to say, I was delighted to discover only quite recently that Claude Shannon, sort of godfather of information science, I discovered he did his PhD in genomics. I don't know how many of us knew that, but it was a delight for me. I felt slightly less of an imposter. But I come at this from a very different perspective. So look, I'm an entrepreneur. I've built 4 or 5 companies over the years and in a number of industries. And I've either listed those on the London Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, or sold them to US NASDAQ listed buyers. And I entered this industry about 5 years ago. And Mohit, I'm just fascinated to see how radically understated the size of the market you projected there on your initial slides is. I mean, I actually came to this space because of the tremendous innovation opportunities. And, I'm just following most recently the guidance provided by McKinsey & Company, and by Boston Consulting Group Henderson Institute, the research establishments that those consultancy firms have developed towards Industry 4.0, which it's increasingly clear is going to have a very significant bio dimension to it. McKinsey and Company describe it as the bio revolution. And to participate in the bio revolution, Boston Consulting Group Henderson Institute describe the opportunity as nature co-design. And so, my perspective on the market is very much bigger than just drug discovery. It is application of bioinformatics and data science technologies to enable customers to participate in the bio revolution. And to that end, we at Eagle Genomics are building a company, a platform company, to enable microbiome science, networking of microbiome science in the first instance, because we perceive that to be the most proximate battleground, if you like, in the bio revolution. Now, just particularly to the question, I think a lot of my frame has been shaped by what I've done over the last 20 years in telecommunications industry, network software for telecommunications industry. 20 plus years ago, that industry was radically disrupted by the introduction of TCP/IP and Internet Protocol. Before then, it was time division multiplex networks, and the 2-bit code Internet Protocol disrupted that industry, first slowly, then incredibly fast. And what happened in the early stages of that disruption was that big companies, the big incumbent telco companies, tried to build groups of people that understood Internet Protocol and could build the technologies to exploit it. And that's what I call first generation dynamics in these enterprises. As the market evolved, we started to see best-in-class applications coming from external vendors and more of a focus on the underlying business from the telco operators. And of course, our industry here, the industry we're all in some way participating in, is being disrupted by the 4-bit code, DNA. And first, in the early stages, we're seeing a lot of companies experimenting, evolving their capabilities to exploit that understanding of DNA, human, animal, microorganism, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what's clear to me as an outsider is that, and I'm not alone in this observation, the dirty secret of data science 1.0 is it's not scaling and it's not scalable. And in order for the industry to really evolve, data science 2.0 is required. And that's a kind of blend of informatics and data science skills with enterprise class technology. And so what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do is fuse enterprise class software skills with bioinformatics skills, data science skills to create this opportunity to scale applications that we can promote to large enterprises that want to participate in the bio revolution, but also to network research establishments so that we can enable collaboration between the players in this bio revolution. And I think that's liberating tremendous opportunity for people in the bioinformatics industry. I think the bioinformatics career path is evolving really, really quickly. I think it has to have, and it's incumbent on us to infuse entrepreneurial skills as well as technology skills in the students and the researchers that we're cultivating for this bio revolution. And I see nothing but just incredible opportunity in that regard.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony, and thank you, Mohit and Shamir. I can go next. I'm Darun Walia. I'm a biotechnologist by training, as Mohit mentioned. And for the last 15 years, I've been working at the cusp of biotechnology, commercialization, as well as data science. And I agree with a lot of thoughts that you both have already put forward. And I believe the opportunity is high. There are a few things that I really advise a lot of people to focus on is, going multidimensional. But what I mean by that is, for years, the data science has been studied in a very different way from what biomedical or pharma or discovery has been studied in. Now, bioinformatics is a field that, of course, ties up the two, but there are still so many gaps which are there and which, you come to know when you're speaking to a core data scientist who's doing machine learning or building AI models. And when you talk to a research scientist and he's more willing to do those mouse models and the research, right? So how do you tie up the two? Is there a way where you can if not an expert, is there a way you can understand both areas really well and then tie it up with the commercialization process? By commercialization, I mean is where do we have a window of opportunity for a drug therapy to be there or a diagnostic to be there? So just having the commercial acumen tied up with the data scientist and tied up with the research side is something that I really want people to focus on in the future.
And I will finish off with comments. So Naheed, Kurgi, it's such a pleasure to be here today and to listen to and join this panel. I'm also not a scientist. So Anthony, there's two of us, and I'll consider myself an interloper as well. And my background is historically in finance and strategy. And back in the day, I spent a lot of time in humanitarian aid before then coming back and making a contribution back to the life sciences, which is where I believe the most impact can be had in humanitarian work. Is how do we make medicines and make those medicines available broadly to people all over the world? And how do we think about data, balanced data, fair data, the availability and the application of that data in the pursuit of medicines to cure diseases, many of which are so rampant in areas of the world where there are patients who may not be able to afford the prices that exist in Western or more European societies, but still have desperate needs. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time. And it's a pleasure to be here today. When I saw your opening remarks, Mohit, in that one slide where you just showed the growth of, I think it was data, it reminded me vividly of the growth of the protein data bank. Now, a little bit about Cyclica. We are a quote unquote AI for drug discovery company. And in today's environment, we design small molecules to interact with desirable proteins and avoid undesirable anti-targets or proteins that you'd want to avoid for toxicity reasons or for selectivity reasons. And so for us right now, as a 60+ person company with offices across the world, our strength on the R&D side is in structural biology, computational structural biology, computational biophysics. And if you go back to Linus Pauling and the determination of the first protein structure, I think that took him approximately 22 years to deposit that first protein structure into the PD, what is now the PDB, an open source repository of all protein structures. I think that was back in 1948, and it took him a lot of time. And then in 1978, the PDB became available. And if we look at from 1978 to about 2013, when Cyclica was formed, there was a fairly exponential growth in the total number of protein structures that were available in the PDB. When we started, there were about 95,000 protein structures that represented, give or take, 20 to 30% of the entire proteome, the 20-30% of the genome. Today, 181,000. In a span of 7 years, it's doubled. There's more structures being deposited, increasing our knowledge of biology, increase our knowledge and availability of things to prosecute. And when you couple that, which I will say as an asterisk, that was before AlphaFold, DeepMind released their AlphaFold 2 code and have now made available essentially the entire proteome across 20 species, and over the next few years, hundreds to thousands of species. Before all that, there was this exponential growth of data. So when you take the availability of proteomics data, genomics data, transcriptomics data, clinical trials and real world evidence data, you have amassed an availability unlike any other time in history on data. But the most important thing that we've been thinking about is not the amount of data, but the quality of data, the representation and the fairness of data, and then also how to use that data in a thoughtful way to solve real problems, not just to take data to solve any problem. And so for us, it's abstracting the problems that exist in biomedical science, truly understanding bifurcating it, truly understanding the problems that exist, and then matching the data with the algorithms, and then with the advance of cloud computing, whether it be GCP, Amazon, Azure, and now with NVIDIA and how strong they're getting into the biomedical science space, with GPUs, and then what's coming down the pipeline of quantum computing. And so for us, it's how do we take all of this available data, take cloud computing, take algorithmic development, whether it be machine learning or deep learning, and start asking ourselves questions of what's possible and what are the problems that can be solved. And so for me, as a non-scientist, by classical training, I've spent an inordinate amount of my time studying and spending a lot of time with people at the interface of those three areas. And at Cyclica, when we look at the team of students that we have brought in, some straight out of bachelor's degrees, MSCs, PhDs, postdocs, people from industry, we're living within the intersection of experimental science, computational science, and then humanities. Do they have the deep empathy to go and seek out those problems in a very new way? And so I'm happy to kind of talk a little bit about how we've built a team. We're going from 60 to about 150 over the next couple of years, and what types of skills and experiences we are looking for, and what I encourage students to go seek in the pursuit of what is the biggest opportunity, which is the making of medicines.
Thank you, everyone. So really good insights, and I wanted to jump in here and kind of, direct the conversation towards. First of all, I will start from something that Dr. Khader already mentioned. As a biology interested student going into computer science and then finding himself at the end in this career of bioinformatics or data science, and kind of picking up on some of the other highlights that all of you agreed on, that really industry is not just solving any problem, like Naheed said, but specific problems that are, the real quote unquote problems to be solved, right? So there definitely exists kind of like a gap, I think, from a student perspective on what does that look like, right? And so hearing about all of these exciting topics, addressing medical needs, bringing better medicines to market, maybe solving some real scientific challenges. How do you envision somebody that is still a student or an early career scientist, kind of understanding what exactly, when you envision this big machine of 150 people working on a particular problem, or, thousands of people working on another problem, how can they kind of see their future using bioinformatics, some of the problems that your companies are working on? So maybe I can start with Anthony. What do you think about that?
Well, it's each and every company is, despite the opportunity we all have to research at our desks, every company is by and large a black box, and you can only glean so much about a company from the outside. And I think it's incumbent on us to therefore provide structured paths for individuals that can know only so much, that are competent, capable, that are increasingly sought after resources. It's incumbent on us to create the pathways for them to explore and then specialize, after a period of time within the organizations that we're creating. And I think, by the way, another thing I'd say about myself just quickly is that I left school and did an aircraft engineering apprenticeship. I ended up fulfilling my boyhood dreams really early as a radio radar engineer on Concorde, the supersonic airliner. And then I got fired because British Airways, which was the company I was working with, got privatized. But I look back to those 4 years where I just learned horizontally across a huge number of domains before I started to specialize, as formative in my career as an entrepreneur and as someone who's able to do things. And so we're trying to instantiate that apprenticeship structure, apprenticeship program within Eagle Genomics. We're working closely with universities in Cambridge to develop and deliver what's described over here in the UK, at least, as a level 5 apprenticeship, so that people can explore, they can attach to individuals that are experts in a range of domains. They can be mentored by these people, they can discover their core skills, and they can recognize where their strengths lie, and therefore where they ought to put their energies, because we're great believers in strengths-based coaching, identifying what people are cut out to do unconsciously without being burdened by doing it, and then vectoring them towards that path so that they can really exploit their skills. I think that's one of the things I'd say. The other thing I'd say is that the field is moving so incredibly fast that one has to look forwards as well as backwards. When I talk about backwards, I mean the technologies that are available today to learn. They are going to be evolving so quickly that one shouldn't be worried too much about specializing, and one should be open-minded about how to evolve in the future. What I'd say also about the focus we have is that we're in much the same way as Naheed has described his business, we are trying to network microbiome science. So we're using network science as the kind of fundament on which to build our platform and our business. Delighted to say we raised Series A funding last year, and we managed to get one of the leading thinkers on network science, Laszlo Barabashi, to invest in our business. We're about to raise a Series B round of funding. But I think what I'm trying to describe is a picture that's highly fluid in the early stages so that we can attract the right resources, provide them with a framework such that they can learn broadly and then specialize deeply. And I think we have to offer that kind of career path to individuals, lest we try to get people too focused too quickly.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Khader, would you like to add to that from your perspective?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, some interesting statistics I want to share with this group. Actually, over the last year, I might have interviewed more than 100, quote unquote data scientists, sort of junior to senior level role. And then also been leading some of our internship and program, global internship program. And we recruited more than 15 interns over the last 6 months, but we received more than 800 applications. Right? Like you just, just think about it, and then for each and every one of you who are students and trainees in this group, how can you differentiate? And this is just, one company's one department, looking to fill a few internship positions. And that particular position, the one where we got 800 was actually for a US based. Unfortunately, this was only open for US based graduate students, so there are like certain country requirements for some of these positions. But we received applications from everywhere in the world, which is okay. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't hire all of them. And then when I was going through that whole process, whether pre-screening, screening, and then finally interviewing a lot of candidates, we finally hired our interns. Actually, they're about to finish their projects and all. What I wanted to kind of tell you is that what was that quality that led to that final offer, from my perspective, right? Like they were, doesn't matter, in an interview, and that's the traditional interview process where you send an application, you review the CV, you bring them in, and then you have a face-to-face interview. But then that first step is to select your CV. So it's definitely important what you put in your CV. So if you're a student, make sure that you have some kind of a project-based learning. Whether it's putting extra time with your professor or collaborating with another friend or working at a company that's straight across your university, go ahead and do that. That's as important as your coursework. I know schedule is tough, and right now we live in a pandemic world. We cannot really go in IRL. That's not possible. But then you can reach out to them, send an email, make sure that you have that. So one of the factor that stood out for these applicants were they had some kind of experience. And then the question would come from students, oh, that means we always have to have a project to get to an internship. No, that's not the case. You can still be doing, undergrad in anthropology and want to do human data science. That differentiate you, just like what Naheed was mentioning, right? Like you bring in a different perspective to the group. That's also okay. And then the other part is when you come into the interview, it's your communication and clarity. Doesn't matter whether you worked on, I don't know, the predicting seed properties, or you worked in identifying how to launch satellites. It doesn't matter unless and until you are able to give your elevator pitch in 3 minutes or so. We all have, if you take humanity itself, our attention span is reducing, right? Like we all have that issue. If you think about most leading social media platform right now is TikTok. An average length of a TikTok video is 15 seconds. So we are living in that world. So you have to have that, your elevator pitch ready. You have to have clarity and communication. And then, let's say if we hire you, what matters the most? It's not maybe it doesn't matter whether you are one of the world's best machine learning scientists or programmer. These skills that we talked about, you can communicate clearly. You can have good engagement with your stakeholders in an industry perspective, whether it's your group that you work with, your line manager or the team that you're working with, and then also making sure that you understand the change management aspects that you will bring into the table. What I meant by that is, whether it's stakeholder engagement and change management, these might be new to many students here, because traditionally we don't teach management or strategy to our science STEM based, STE based programs. Of course, if it's mathematics or management, depends on that. But stakeholder engagement is how do you deliver your project in a refined and in a sort of a very much in a predefined way, and make sure that all the deliverables are met within your schedule. And then you need to have some kind of a direct communication line with all your stakeholders of the project who either funded your position or funded that project. And then what's change management? Let's say you're building this beautiful algorithm, whether it's for small molecule prediction or to identify a cancer patient subtype. Who's going to use that algorithm? Will they use that algorithm? Are they going to trust in that algorithm? What baseline did you use? Did you communicate that, of course, with the stakeholders, but also with your users? If you don't have a user, a multi-million-dollar investment in AI is not going to have any benefit. So these are the things you have to think about, right? Like, of course, your science and technology skills, your scientific and technology skills are important. I'm not saying that they are not important, but are you able to communicate your idea clearly? Are you ready to engage with your stakeholders? Are you ready to have this dialogue to do change management? These are important skills. And this kind of carry forward, doesn't matter whether you're an intern, you're coming as for a full-time role, or you in your leadership journey throughout this segment of this particular industry. This matters a lot. So the long story short version of that is, to make sure your communication and clarity, that's going to be the number one skill. It's not your Python programming or how to run single cell sequencing. They're good, they're great, but are you able to interpret and explain your result to your lab, to your group, to your collaborators? That matters a lot.
Great.
Do you mind if I jump in and just provide a perspective from a small budding company, not an AZ company? I agree a lot with what Shamir said in overall remarks, but there's a couple nuances as students are thinking about applying to a earlier stage company than a large pharma. And I will say AZ and Cyclica have done a lot of work with Astrazeneca, and Paul Agapau is a close friend, and Shamir, I'm sure in the data science group, you've worked with Paul, and we've done some and published some work with AZ in the data science space. But here's what I'd like to say to students who are thinking about applying to earlier stage companies. Generally, when you're applying to an earlier stage company, a seed stage, typically 5 to 7, 8 people, Series A, 8 to 20, 30, 40 people, and then beyond, depending, especially in the biotech stage, that's usually where they line up. If you're applying earlier on, I would highly encourage you to truly know the entrepreneur or the co-founders of the company, listen to and read what they've been saying in the marketplace, and understand what that company is talking about, and match your views and visions to that, and what can you do to augment. Because there is going to be, whether you're a co-op, an intern or a co-op, an employee and a contributor going into a management role, that becomes a very important role for that company. And of a group of dozens to hundreds of applicants, they're going to invest a lot of time reading through each one. At Cyclica, at each stage, we've done HR with students well at some points in time. We've done it poorly at some points in time. But what we've continued to invest in is the student marketplace. We have rolling co-ops with the University of Waterloo, University of Toronto. We brought in co-ops from Northeastern University, where we have an office in Boston. That's something that we pride ourselves heavily in. And then we've continued to disseminate content through what was previously called AI Ate My Homework, an online forum where we talk about everything from target selection to clinical development and how AI is playing a role. And we'll have our team and then external folks come and talk about that, generally made available to high school and university and graduate students. And so this becomes really important. But what I'd encourage, as you learn, there's all this material that startup companies disseminate to the market to build their brand. Don't make it an application that is cookie cutter, because that company is differentiated. They're fighting every single day to differentiate themselves. So it behooves you as an applicant to say how you're differentiating yourself and how you and that company are going to help differentiate. And so I've seen far too many just, application that you can take out the name of Cyclica and replace it with any other company. And that loses traction in our eyes, because we are going to, in the information age of 15-second TikTok videos, we fight against that fallacy, and we instead encourage all of our hiring managers to read everything. And as we go through reading that information, it becomes abundantly clear those who are just applying because there's a job application versus those who are genuinely interested in earnestly joining Cyclica. And the last thing I would say is that there's two types of applicants. There are those who are deeply immersed in the subject matter of bioinformatics or computational chemistry or computational biophysics, whether they be third-year undergrad students or graduate students or postdocs. Those are the ones that had a directionality to their educational experience, and they have clarity generally as to where they want to fit. And then there are those who are anthropologists who want to bring in a human element, to Shamir's point. Highly valuable, but maybe they went down a different career path educationally, but now they want to make the leap. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and organizational behavior. I spent time in finance and strategy, and somehow I joined and co-founded an AI and drug discovery company, and now I'm the CEO of this company. So there is merit in the non-classical approach. We have hired musicians as data scientists who then self-code and learn to self-code. We brought on musicians to help on our design of our user interface for our internal. And so it really becomes, how do you tell your story depending on your directionality of your career, related or unrelated, if you are genuinely interested in joining that company. Your brand is the sum of all experiences that a person will have with you. So you've got to make sure that as quickly as possible, but as consistently as possible, you're able to tell that story as to why that company should choose you.
Tarun, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. I think my panelists had a really strong points. I'll just keep it very short. But I think Shamir put up a fantastic point when he said you need to differentiate your application, or you need to differentiate yourself. And there are various ways I have seen applicants differentiate. I mean, some of them really use social media really well. And by social media, I mean LinkedIn, like, putting yourself out there and sharing the work you've done. It can be small research, but positioning it, how it can have an impact in the long term, or how it can add value to the company that you are applying for. Another thing that really works well is understanding the company that you're applying for. Not all companies are the same. You may want to keep different resumes. Some are focusing on, say, oncology. You want to focus what you've done in that area. Some are focusing on, say, cardiovascular. You cannot have the same kind of research for both. It's again points to differentiate yourself, because if I'm reading something where I'm working for an oncology company and someone has that experience, yes, he'll be weighed slightly higher. And of course, it doesn't mean that you have to know everything. What it means is how you can position yourself for that role, that yes, you are the person for this job. And then the other point that both Naheed and Shamir put forward is on the teamwork side of it. I think I would love to have a team player on my team. So someone who can work well with others, and there are ways you can distinguish, or there are ways you can focus on in the interviews and in the overall process. And someone who can show that impact, even if he's not done a lot of research, but is willing to learn and willing to make an impact. So I think these are certain ways where you can really differentiate yourself. And that's the key point I would take away from the conversation.
Thank you. I think it was amazing that we all discussed all of this, because if I have to summarize, there was so much value in all of the conversations that we have had. It's really difficult to summarize all of it, but I do have a few points that I would want to highlight here. So all of you being leaders and being able to do a lot of training in this manner, where we are talking about integrating other players into our team, and then it requires to have that sort of understanding where I mean, this process is like get simpler. Like it should not be more complex. Then it becomes challenging. So what I've heard from Shamir is that like there are some skills and that is required, but there are some other soft skills also which are required. So at times, I think it helps to think them through and have a strategy or think about the things that could happen. And that kind of vision can comes from this sort of understanding where you are telling that these are important things that we have to consider. So that I think that gives us a lot of value to the students who are listening here and maybe thinking that, okay, maybe this is a X scenario, and if I have to put myself in that X scenario, what are the different outcomes, different people, different thinking that I could address while being in a group, while being a team player. So I think it requires a lot of thinking in that context, and being able to understand about a company. I saw that like one thing that I would wanted to mention, especially for a big pharma, or like when we would want to understand that what is actually going on there. So the difference, like what we see in research labs, many times we kind of look for the PI and then we find the articles and then we find that the methods that they've been using. So it's really kind of easy for a student to investigate further about a research lab and look for the PI and go for like an internship or something like that. But when it comes to a company, the openness there is limited. So I mean, for us to understand that how bioinformatics differs in a company versus a research is a gap or is also a challenge. So Dr. Shamir, what do you think about this?
Yeah, sure. So, there is nothing like a perfect candidate, right? Like we always have, there is a human element to hiring for that matter. And we don't expect, everybody to know everything. And within our data science and AI group, we have a significant section of our group is actually dedicated to learning and development. So you will bring certain skills to the table, but additional skills, whether let's say you have some background in statistical modeling, but you want to learn computer vision, we will have courses, or we will immerse you within a team that actually doing computer vision day in, day out. So we need to make sure that you will come in and then you can build your, your technology portfolio, your skills like that. So that's always possible in a pharma company like, in a company like ours, or other players in the industry as well. And then the other part is like, what we have to understand here is, if you take bioinformatics as a whole, like what some of these parts of bioinformatics we will do internally, some of these would be done by CRO, some of this would be done by other types of companies, smaller companies that are actually hyper-focused on that particular type of analytics. And then what you will do internally might be still at the bleeding edge. So you have to get ready for that. It's going to be a little bit different than a traditional academic setting where you will keep on analyzing or improving your pipeline. Because we need to move the needle. We need to push the boundaries, because anything that you do right now is actually like, if you are in a more R&D focused role, it will be, you're potentially contributing towards a drug that would eventually get developed 5 to 10 years down the line. So you're working backwards, right? Like you're not going to get an FDA approval, in this year or this month for an R&D stage molecule right now. So you will basically contribute that. You're working towards what could happen in 5 to 10 years. And if each and every one of us think about where bioinformatics was 5 to 10 years ago versus now, we can literally see it growing, right? Like, whether it's access to high performance computing or more algorithms, more methods, we see that. So we just be future ready, just be ready to sink in. And if, that's what I would say, and go with an open mind. That was Tarun's point, right? Like, if you're good at certain skill, whether it's writing, communications, social media, or even as simple as making videos, have a catalog of your work somewhere so that we can see that we can understand your skills. Okay, you insert something that's unique, and then you want to come in and become a data scientist or running pipelines like this. This can be done, that's for sure. And one more last point I could make here is that the industry is seeing an influx of career in this space, right? Like, and Naheed also mentioned about this. We have, initially it was just data scientist. Now it's data engineer, there's two separate roles. Now we have, we used to have, DevOps to support the whole development team. Now we have MLOps, AIOps. Now, down the lane, 5 years on, I don't know, maybe there is a bioinformatics ops, I don't know. I'm like, so there are new things that would eventually evolve, and you can shape up your career towards that. So be open. And one advice that I could give to the students is that just because, you have strong biology, you doesn't code, don't think you cannot work in bioinformatics, because we need a lot of analysts. We need a lot of people to do biocuration. We need a lot of people to validate the algorithm. We need a lot of test engineers. So there is nothing like, okay, a good bioinformatics job means, database programming and advanced machine learning. No, it's fundamentally, it's communication, writing skills, your like I said, stakeholder engagement, these are the skills. And on top of that, be good at one thing, either it's programming, either it's genetics, either it's curating variants. It doesn't matter. There is always an opportunity. And I personally don't believe, even with the influx of all of these advanced machine learning or applied machine learning, I'm someone who's doing this I started doing it in 2002, maybe 2001. It's going to be 20 years. I've seen that applied AI in biomedicine for the last roughly 20 years. Don't worry, algorithms are not going to take your job. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. It's good to have that good algorithm development skill, but we still need curators. We still need developers and engineers and all. So yeah, so that would be my take on it.
Those are some fantastic points, Shamir. I would love to add a bit here. And, one of the things I also see when people transition from research to the corporate side is I think the people succeed when they are able to relate to what makes the company succeed. For instance, when you are doing a research, your focus is on, okay, let me focus on this particular aspect of the value chain, and you forget the downstream value chain. And the downstream is your clinical development, your commercialization, and bringing the product to market where you can help patients, right? So the more you converse with your counterparts downstream, like talking to clinicians, how do you decide the endpoints? What patient segments are we targeting? How is this research adding value downstream? And then also talking to the commercialization folks, like what is the patient need? And then, just having that dialogue with your colleagues across the value chain, that really helps when you're entering a company from the research side. So, yeah.
And if I may, just to pick up and amplify on what Tarun has just said there, my experience is often that with people transitioning from science to industry, that they are very focused on the ground truth and the proximate deviation from a ground truth. And sometimes, and most often in an entrepreneurial environment, certainly building a company, there's a lot of ambiguity and a huge amount of abstraction is required to be successful. And perhaps this is most simply characterized with fixed versus growth mindset. I think what Tarun's saying, the people that are successful in reaching out to understand downstream the shape of what's coming, those are people that are required to have this growth mindset. I think, to really benefit in the future, that is a key attribute, I'd say.
I don't have too much more to add, and I want to make sure that if there are any other questions, we can go to that. But the only thing that I would close out with is know what you don't know as well and go seek out that knowledge. Education is the best competitive differentiator, and it doesn't have to come through classical means. Coursera, edX, there are so many different, MIT with the Sloan management they have and the relationship with Coursera. I have no affiliation with MIT. I've just taken a bunch of courses and I have 4 more lined up for the rest of the year. Within the company or outside of the company, just continue to see trends that you like, follow some, and then create your own. And the only way that I think that's possible is through A, continuous education, and B, application and testing those things out in the context of what works, what doesn't work, and continuing to iterate. You can't call yourself a ML scientist, a data scientist, if you're not willing or able to Bayesian update your own mental model based on things that are happening in the industry. And so as students, just continue to, whether you're a high school student or you're 65 years old and looking to get into a new industry, or myself, which continuing to try and learn and stay ahead of stuff, just continue to educate.
So thank you, everyone. This really kind of like what I heard, some of the things, and I heard very different things, So Anthony mentioned they have an established apprenticeship program with a particular university, and I'm imagining you're kind of trying to build that out further. And then, Shamir mentioned that he has interviewed a lot of applicants from around the world. There are specific positions and specific skills that they're looking for, but there's a lot of this corporate structure on top of basic skills. And then I heard also from Naheed, as a smaller company, how important it is to kind of realize the vision and kind of align yourself with that vision and kind of highlight how you can contribute to that and grow and continue and expand. And then Tarun also mentioned how, understanding the domain and kind of like showcasing what you have done in that domain is very important. So that brings me to this question of relationship with universities. You can obviously build your own ecosystem, right? You can participate in research and kind of showcase what your company is doing in that space. But in many cases, students don't come from nowhere, right? They're already a part of an ecosystem. They're already a part of something that they've been led to believe or to kind of envision themselves, right? And those examples that they have in front of them and the pathway that they've went through that kind of shows them what they might be possible, might be able to achieve. So my question is really, how can universities prepare students for careers that you see in industry? Specifically for companies that hire bioinformaticians or from those backgrounds. How can faculty at universities, how can the administration at the universities potentially work with companies like yours to establish that pathway and kind of provide that future for their students?
I can take that one first if you'd like. I don't come from a research institution, so for profit, but we have at the moment relationships with over 220 research institutions globally as part of our Cyclica academic partnership program. And we open up, and it's acronymed CAP, to work with academic and research institutions for 2 reasons. Number one, we make available our computational drug discovery platform available to PIs, principal investigators within those research institutions at no cost to them in the pursuit of advancement of basic science and the translation into potentially commercial viable assets that could maybe one day become drugs. And the second and most important reason is to build brand recognition with the next wave of students and researchers who will be trained under those PIs and may become available into the marketplace eventually, whether they be at big pharma companies like AZ, genomics companies like with Anthony, or they continue to remain within academia and postdocs and then become a PI themselves. How do we help train or affect behavioral change in the minds of many scientists on what is possible with computational approaches, both bioinformatics, physics-based, AI, machine learning, deep learning. So we think a lot about that, and we've instituted that CAP program, and it's been highly, highly successful. Then there's another type of relationship, and I'll point to a few examples. I think Boston does this exceptionally well. And so I'm sure Tarun will talk about how, and I'm not picking on Boston again, I have no affinity, I'm Canadian, but like Boston has done this exceptionally well. Stanford has done this exceptionally well. I think Stanford, I saw a release recently in the past 24 hours where it stated that over the past decade, they've started 680 companies, and the total market cap of those companies is close to 20 billion or 50 billion dollars or something like that, just from startup companies that have come out of Stanford. And so what does that then mean? That generally means is that those companies are created with brains that have been educated in those research institutions that then go translate, go raise venture funding or funding from other environment strategic partners, go translate that research, hire people, create actual economy and jobs generally from the ecosystem as the term was used, and probably likely from their academic institution that they came from. And so there becomes this virtual cycle of training, educating, and then deploying into the marketplace. And there are a couple areas in the world that have done this really, really well. I think Canada, and specifically the beltway between the University of Waterloo and like McGill University in Montreal, have done this very well, especially at the intersection of experimental sciences like biomedical sciences, as well as computational and computer science, AI, etc. With University of Waterloo being a very, very strong school at that frontier. And right at the epicenter is the Vector Institute in Toronto, and then MILA, the Montreal Machine Learning Institute in Montreal. And what they've done is brought in the hospital networks, the research institutions with industry and government funding to not only train the next wave of students, but to provide them with the basic pillars to enable the commercialization or translation of that research into commercially viable entities. And so you're looking now at where is the next frontier of innovation? Yes, absolutely Boston with MIT and Harvard and Northeastern, which is really coming up. And then you have in California, but you have a lot of small little sectors that are growing globally. And I'd point to what's happening in Toronto and in Canada in our space as probably the vectors of influence pointing there.
Yes, thanks, Elia. Just echoing the model that Naheed described, what we're trying to do in networking microbiome science is connecting the leading research establishments that are driving the art and the science with the enterprises that are seeking to exploit that. We're focused not so much on drug discovery in the short term, although that's increasingly part of our focus, but helping industry participants in nutrition and food and nutrition, cosmetics and personal care, and ag bio to network understanding of microbiome science into their models, and on our platform connecting the research establishments with the enterprises so they can collaborate with us, if you like, as the glue in the middle around some particular projects. We're also often sponsoring PhD students within the research establishments. We describe them as knowledge partners that we're working with, and we already have quite a highly distributed business. We are in Cambridge in the UK, in the centre of London, King's Cross, what's called the Knowledge Quarter, next to the Alan Turing Institute, the Francis Crick Institute, Google DeepMind. We're in Manhattan in the New York Genome Center, in Potsdam on the Potsdam Science Park, in Paris in Microsoft's AI Factory, and also in Hyderabad, where we have 30 people already. So we're trying to create local partnerships with research establishments because we want to foster relationships and encourage candidates from those research establishments to come through to join us. But it's really important to us that we are creating clusters where humans can interact with humans, not if in this quasi-virtual world in which we still inhabit. It's not necessary to be together with a mentor or whatever every single day, but it's absolutely germane to our evolution and building of our business that we afford people the opportunities to interact with other humans on a frequent and regular basis. So that's driving our model.
And maybe I could ask actually Tarun to answer next. And together with that, if you could kind of address this question, how do organizations deal with converging business and scientific rigor? So business kind of, interests and scientific rigor together without damaging either.
Wow, that's a tough one. So, there are a lot of conversations around that, how can we have best of the both worlds and make sure that the research we are doing, that's one hand, and the commercialization that we're doing, that's the other hand. And how can we succeed by joining both hands, right? And often the trick here is communication. I mean, an open communication where you're empathizing with the other party, that yes, I understand what you're doing. Not blaming the other party if there is failure. Failures are bound to come. The failure can be from the research side, it can be from the business side. And then I think that's where the role of the CEO, and I think Anthony and Naheed can vouch in there as well. How can CEO play that role where he showcases that yes, the business side is important as well as the research side, and collectively is when we win. So making sure that whatever activity we are doing, by activity I mean it can be experimental research, it can be understanding what is happening from a clinical perspective, and also understanding what is happening from the business perspective, and mentioning how all of these tie up together. And I've seen that, sometimes the business perspective is that, hey, I know what I'm doing, I don't need to understand. You are a researcher, you don't understand this business. So just aligning both parties there. And it's a good question because often it can be detrimental for the organization. So what worked for me when I was working in this area was having sit-togethers with both parties together and somehow being that bridge that can help communicate, because you need to understand both sides of the business to be a good mediator here. And I think I would love to hear even Naheed and Anthony's perspective here, because as CEOs, they are doing it day in and day out.
Tarun, if I may just go directly to that, you've just pinpointed the primary job of the CEO, both internally and externally, is to be translator and modulator of information delivered from different sources, speaking perhaps all English, but fundamentally different languages towards a common goal. And I think at this early stage in the evolution of our industry, where we are bringing together individuals from backgrounds, educational backgrounds, and experiential backgrounds to a particular focused endeavor from a range of different environments, translation is the core skill. And that's the other reason, by the way, why we're so focused on this apprenticeship approach, because we're trying to create the mechanisms to enable people to understand the voices from the range of sources earlier in their careers, because they get too siloed, particularly perhaps most often with PhD postdocs, very focused and without the sort of constant perturbation, if you like, that forces the individual to explore the broader environment beyond the core focus. That becomes increasingly difficult later in a career.
Yeah, not much. Again, you're getting frontline seats to some very thoughtful perspective. There's not much more I can add to that, but I don't also want to remain mute on this important topic. I would say, unlike any other time in history, today there's a convergence of skill sets based on a bunch of stuff that now exists that did not exist even 10 years ago. Again, I go back to the availability of high quality, a lot of high quantum and relevant data that is, when trained with new algorithms like AI or ML, deep learning, what have you, and powered by new infrastructure, cloud computing, or even that which is coming down the pipeline, you now have this convergence of opportunity. And so unlike before, where chemists used to talk to chemists, biologists used to talk to biologists, clinical scientists used to talk to clinical scientists, you're now seeing pharma generally, over the past number of years, create an environment where these people are sitting together, sharing ideas, and therefore incubating converged approaches. So med chemists aren't only talking to med chemists. I think Novartis has come out and actually led the charge in terms of at least how they branded themselves, whether practically, I have no idea, but they brought chemists and biologists and computational folks sitting together. And so as I think about that model and vis-a-vis Cyclica, we have internship programs where we bring on biomedical scientists, bioengineers, computational chemists, but then expose them to different areas within the organization. So we have a group of applied scientists, which is what we call them. There are drug discovery hunters, med chemists, organic chemists, biochemists, biologists, folks that have lived at the bench to do a bunch of stuff, but who have a propensity towards computational techniques or data science techniques. Now, whether or not they trained that way as part of their education, formal education, or they did it on the side, what we've brought in is a group of people who are really curious about not doing it the classical way. And so I would continue to encourage, the company that you want to join, are they able to offer you that, whether it be through formal training or apprenticeship programs like Anthony's company? We do very similar tag teams, bring the teams together and make sure it is interwoven and not separate. But then I would continue to encourage the group of students here, no matter where you are in your career, to continue to seek out that level of information bolted onto the thing that you spike in the most, what you do and what you're most passionate about, but continue to add on to it. And from a company standpoint, make sure that they're able to fulfill that curiosity, that they're able to scratch that curiosity itch for you. As a result, you're able to contribute back to that company, bring a new perspective, but then also leave much more, I'd say, broadly, and like you'll be able to fight the curse of kind of peripheral vision or obfuscating peripheral vision.
Thank you, Naheed. I think all of these thoughts are, very helpful. So, that brings us to the next question, which is on behalf of the community. So we get to interact with a lot of faculty from different universities, and they would want to maybe get involved in a research which is more directed towards the industry. So the question that we get is that how can we get at level to an industrial grade research? And we do understand that there's a gap. But when we think about a community, so I think there is a possibility to leverage that community. So maybe Shamir, I can ask you in that aspect of how do you think Astrazeneca as a company has looked into to address this, to utilize maybe a community or make them bridge this gap?
Sure. Yeah, and then I can also add a quick point for the previous question that the co-panelists were discussing. So we are always looking for talent. We always have internship, co-op, other types of positions. You can always look into our data science and AI career page and apply directly. And then also you can reach out to potential team members, including myself, through LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever is your preferred social media. And we're always looking for collaborations as well. And coming back to the collaboration specifically, so we do have both structured and sort of ad hoc collaborative engagement throughout with our community, in the research community here. And that means, like, for example, we do collaborate with Cambridge mathematics program. So we do research collaboration. We have sort of a co-founder of a Cambridge Center for AI in Medicine in the UK. We have collaborations with Mila, with Broad Institute, several other leading research groups that we collaborate with, and those are like sort of structured. So that's one approach that we're taking. And then also we have we strongly know that we won't be able to solve all of the problems that we have, right? Like, so we do have what you call as a platform called CoSolve. Like, we need communities input to solve some of our grand challenging problems, actually. And if you can look for AstraZeneca CoSolve platform, it's led by a friend, who leads the emerging innovation unit, and you can see a number of projects or problems that we are actually openly looking for collaborators. So that's a second approach. And the third one is, like for example, my group primarily doing machine learning research, and we are always looking for collaborators. We know the problem is these are some of the grand challenges in the industry. We need to work together. So we're always looking for collaborators. So that's on an individual project level or an individual research engagement level, we can definitely think about. So it's a structured programs, there is co-solve, and then also between potentially interested research groups can collaborate as well. Yeah.
That's great to know. Anthony, do you have something for the, researchers like faculty or early researchers to collaborate on? Because many times what we have heard from them is that they wanted to work on exciting projects, they have students, but the research idea is something that does not align well or is not maybe properly structured at times. So maybe at an industry level, if that sort of help or at least guidance is there, that could actually lead to some great outcomes with whatever resources that they have.
Well, thanks, Mohit. I think it's challenging to give you a coherent answer in describing sort of point solutions. I think we're trying to look at this at the macroscopic level by trying to understand the incentives of particular research establishments, what drives their interest and focus in engaging with a particular enterprise, or what their research niche focus is, and whether we can match that with a particular enterprise that's looking at the gap in its own capability to be filled with that understanding. And we're actually trying to instantiate on our platform mechanisms for matching to enable that, so that we understand the incentives of the research establishments, we understand the incentives of the enterprises, and we can seek to match. That's a challenging endeavor, but it's already bearing fruit because we're selling our software application, the eData Scientist, into large enterprises, and they're asking us to network data from research establishments on the other side. So the beginning of this ecosystem orchestration opportunity, we're seeing that now. But I think we're still some significant way from being able to, say to a particular researcher within a particular, knowledge partner or research establishment, look, you're doing interesting work. This enterprise is interested in perhaps collaborating with you. I do see over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, the evolution of more clever data-orientated marketplace structures where we do match research establishments with enterprises, because that's necessary for the acceleration of the science that we're all involved in at the moment.
Thank you. So one question that I have, especially maybe if Naheed, we can answer that. So we heard about top institutions being one of those places where the companies look forward for innovation as well as for students. So there are also, we got to work with a lot of students from Africa, especially we have a collaboration in Nigeria. And there are other countries where students are there who are equally capable, but they are not exposed to these opportunities. But the things have kind of changed with the COVID, the silver lining that many things are now online and they get an opportunity. So do you have anything for students like that who are coming from maybe so-called third world countries where the education system is not as structured or as good as other countries comparatively?
Good science happens all over the world. You don't have to have a MIT or an Oxford or a Cambridge or University of Toronto or a Berkeley logo next to your resume. Now, so that is a firm belief. Secondly, from our perspective, you will quickly suss out from the company that you're applying to whether or not they have that ethical alignment. Look at the people on their website. Are they generally building a company that is of like-minded people to them or have similar degrees from similar types of institutions? Or is it a little bit more diverse? And are they open to that belief? So I think, unfortunately, I think a large percentage of companies generally, especially in North America and many in Europe, will go and hire from institutions that they were trained at or that they know very closely. we've tried to push on that belief. There are complexities in bringing on, as a Canadian or a US or European company, bringing on co-ops or employees in other countries. So there is a hurdle that companies need to overcome to justify bringing on a student, whether it be in Nigeria or in Rwanda or in the Philippines or in Papua New Guinea. And that's tax and, you know, employment law and all these things. And so how do you convince the company that you are the best person for this and for them to make that investment? So that's, you know, from the role of an individual applying to the company. Now there's the role of the company and what they need to do. And I continue to encourage companies, especially early stage, that if it's not us that is going, you know, especially the leaders in the industry, if we're not willing to think differently, then it's never going to happen. So I spend a lot of my time globally outside of North America and Western societies. And I've spent a lot of time in Asia, in many of the emerging markets. I've spent a lot of time in Africa. You know, my family is East African, Kenya and Tanzania, and I was at the Next Einstein Forum in Kigali, Rwanda in 2018, and I got to speak to, on behalf of the Chancellor of the University of Rwanda, a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and the Managing Director of Elsevier. We got on stage to speak with 2,000 STEM students at the University of Rwanda to encourage them to continue to pursue their passions, to help them think about how to brand themselves to companies that they may want to join that aren't doing business in their country. But then also, my rallying cry was, how do we as companies that have the resources available, how do we continue to invest in those students, whether it be through technology access, education, exposure, or through internships or other environments to bring them over? So I'd say we're not nearly perfect, but it's worth the fight. You know, we have, as our director of drug design platform team, he was educated in South Africa, right? Like, we have students that we've brought. We have students from India that we have brought over to Canada, students from China that we brought in over from China to study and to work at Cyclica. Now, that mindset has to shift from a lot of companies to enable more open environments. But from a student perspective, that's not your business. Your business is continue to fight and differentiate. And if you want it, just go tell a really good story as to why that company should choose you over somebody that's in their own backyard.
Thank you. I think that is a lot of courage to all of the students here. Now, maybe Ilya, do you have something to add?
Yeah,
Tarun
so
has to say something. There was a hand raised by Tarun. Tarun, do you wanted to add something to this? And especially for the students in India?
No, I was just clapping. I mean, I didn't want to raise hand. I agree. I agreed with the point that Naheed said. I wouldn't take much time, but yes, I think I'm in complete agreement with Naheed here on both the points. The world is your oyster. I think it does not matter these days if you are bringing value. It does not matter where you're coming from, and the focus has to be on showcasing how can you, make that impact, create that value for the organization that you want to join in. So focus on that rather than, again, there are controllables in life and then there are uncontrollables. So wherever you've already studied, it's an uncontrollable now. So let's not focus there, right? So I only want to focus on what I can control. What I can control is the next steps, and that is maximizing the value that I can bring on the table. Just focus on that. Don't even think where you're coming from. And then second is, again, in agreement with Naheed, it also matters what the philosophy of the company is. If the company is someone they only want to recruit from a certain places, don't apply there. I mean, that's their loss, not your loss. So figure it out and go for that opportunity that you think you're capable of. Don't let the past or don't let where you're from let you discourage. That's one thing I definitely want to put on the table.
So I just want to jump in here, and I want to mention that it's been really a pleasure to hear all of your perspectives on these important topics from all of our participants. We want to ask you for just your final remarks, and we want to then move on to the poster competition. But I do want to just ask everyone if you want to add a minute or two of final remarks before we move on. Thank you.
I'll kick it off, as I just want to add one more comment to this important topic that Tarun and I just covered. I'll give a quick example and then I'll conclude. Now more than ever, especially in a ongoing post, whatever you want to call it, COVID environment, what's become clear to companies is that talent is global. And you're seeing not only talent, but venture capital institutions are funding. They used to fund in their own backyard because why not? And now they're saying, well, let's go fund globally. And where capital goes, then teams grow and things are leveling off to an extent where companies are looking to hire. And so now more than ever, ramp up your effort to go find those institutions that admire, or that you are most aligned with, that you admire, that you are scientifically passionate about. I'll give a great example of a student who approached Cyclica. She's now on our machine learning team. She's been with us for 2.5 years, but she came from Cuba. We had no idea who this person was. We had no idea that Cuba had a strong systems biology and bioinformatics division, because we just weren't spending time scouring the Cuban market for talent. But this individual found a way to somebody important within the Cyclica environment, built a relationship with this individual, and that individual pinged me and said, I think you need to take this person seriously, have a conversation. And within a few weeks, we went through what in Canada is called the labor market investment analysis. We invested a lot of time and capital out of our pocket to bring this person over to Cuba and manage their entire visa application, whereby we could have saved a lot of time and a lot of effort to just go in our own backyard, because that individual was the right person for us. But how did they go about it? What they did not do was ping me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm interested in joining Cyclica. Can I have an interview? Because I'm the last person that is going to know what to do for a specific contributor on a team. So my encouragement is LinkedIn is an important tool. And since sitting here, 20 people have asked me to invite over LinkedIn. Awesome, I've accepted all of you. But if you're interested in joining Cyclica, understand what we're doing, understand who within the company is the most important person to build a relationship with, build a relationship with them. It will take time. And that's the way you differentiate yourself beyond just applying to a job online. And so it takes effort, it takes smarts, it takes strategy, and it takes the will to allow the time to come at you. So if I'm going to conclude, my feedback to all of you is use the resources that are available to you as a overall strategy, build that strategy, and be smart about how you go about it, because it is possible. And I can give you dozens of examples of how we've gone about it, but each one of those, that individual came to us in a very unique way.
Thank you very much. Anthony, do you have any closing remarks?
I think, understand your why as an individual. Why are you doing what you're doing? What is your motivation? What is your end goal? End goal in terms of what fulfills you, rather than a narrow short-term research objective, and then try and match your why with the why of the organization that you want to work with. Because if you do that, then you will liberate your talents and you'll deliver something to the enterprise you're working with. I think just echoing what Naheed says, the COVID pandemic has caused us at Eagle Genomics to build a highly distributed global business, because there was just no other way. And actually, we've discovered that that's a competitive advantage. We're not going to go back to the old. We're not going to consolidate back to the small, narrow geographic focus we had previously. So there never has been a better time. But do your homework. I think the panelists have said that before. Understand your why and match it with the why of the enterprise you're seeking to work with. And then I think alchemy can be liberated with that.
Okay, thank you. Shamir, would you like to add something?
Sure, thank you. So I strongly believe, irrespective of all the advances that we have right now, whether it's in, whether it's data, machine intelligence, algorithms, robotics, we are still, not close to that sort of a dream of getting that right drug to right patient that would lead to, an optimal outcome and, and least side effect. We are not yet there. We are on a path towards that. And we are all in this journey together. There are plenty of career opportunity, and the field is just getting more exciting because we are now moved from mono-omic data set to multi-omics, and there is more to come. If you look at the biological aspects behind this, so it's a really exciting field, and we need all hands on the deck. That's what I want to kind of put together as my last comment.
Thank you, and Tarun, maybe you could summarize.
I think most of my panelists have already covered the major points. I'll just keep it on the philosophical side, where I would say keep that inquisitiveness quotient on. I mean, often what makes the difference in the longer run is asking that one question from someone who can help you. And more often that, I have realized in my career is that people are willing to help. People are willing to answer those questions, even if they look stupid to you. So, keep on learning. There is no limit to that. Beef up on that knowledge and reach out to people where you face hurdles, and you never know who can be your guardian angel and can help you. So that is something that even Naheed said, someone reached out to him. He took that call, and often, you'll find walls as well, but you'll also find your guardian angels. So just keep on doing that. I'm happy to, answer more questions on LinkedIn as well. I'll post my LinkedIn ID. I connect with people wherever needed. So happy to help where I can.
All right, great. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Mohit, for moderating the panel. Would you like to kind of summarize what we've heard so we can transition away?
Yeah, thank you so much. We have had a wonderful session with all of you here. Thank you for your time. And I think we got to learn a lot from a student perspective, from a researcher's perspective, from in general, that what are the steps that are required for us to take next. And we also learned about the internship opportunities that each of the companies have to offer, along with other opportunities and skill sets that you are looking forward to.